So I think what's different about a career at the Planning and Environmental Bar as opposed to other areas of law is that generally we're in the business of looking to the future. So we're not poring over the minutiae of what's happened in the past. We are asking questions like, should this building be built in this particular location? Is this countryside location a good place for this solar farm? Should this town centre regeneration go ahead and in the form that's proposed?
I think a big advantage of a career at the Planning and Environmental Bar is the sheer variety of the work that you undertake. And a lot of it really has a political aspect to it, which I think people might not necessarily appreciate in advance.
I think the one thing to understand is that although we are a public law chamber, much of our work is planning, and those raise really interesting questions as to the way in which we use land for housing, for infrastructure, for social development, etc. So it's an ever-changing area of law.
So the life of a planning and environmental law barrister can be incredibly varied. So one day I might be in the High Court arguing a case in a judicial review. The next day I might spend the day in chambers doing paperwork. The day after that I could be putting my wellies in my backpack, getting on a train and going to meet a client on a site visit in the middle of the countryside. So the one thing that I think prospective applicants should know about FTB is that if you are interested in public law and want to be able to do advocacy from an early stage in your career of different types in court, in inquiries, then FTB is somewhere where you will be able to do that.
In terms of what makes FTB stand out from other sets, I think it's the fact that we have a focus on the full spectrum of planning law, and no other set is able to offer that. And so we offer the full range of expertise from massive infrastructure projects to council tax to licensing, and what that means is that we have a real breadth and depth of expertise in those matters. And in terms of an individual applicant who's looking to become a barrister at FTB, I would say that the advantage that that gives you is almost like a ready-made specialist practice area, which is of considerable advantage when you're going forward in your career.
In my view, what makes FTB stand out from other sets of chambers is the supportive culture. And what I mean by that is generally within chambers there's an open door policy. So even when you are quite junior, senior members of chambers are very happy for you to knock on their door, go in and discuss any issues or problems you have with them, whether that be legal problems and cases that you're dealing with, or whether that is issues to do with practice management or even personal issues. And I think that supportive nature really sets us apart from other sets.
The one thing that I think prospective applicants should know about FTB is that it's not what you think it is. I remember thinking about applying for chambers and looking at the profiles of all the people who are now my colleagues and thinking, oh, this is really intimidating. These people are all really clever and they're nothing like me, and this place wouldn't be for me. And I felt really intimidated about applying, but I wanted to do this sort of work. So I just went ahead and did it and figured I didn't really have anything to lose. And I didn't have anything to lose. I got a place here and it turned out that actually, you know, everybody was like me. I found a place that was full of people who were supportive and kind and who weren't nearly as intimidating as their profiles made them sound.
What I'd encourage people to apply is the quality of the training here. We're very lucky to have some of the leading practitioners in chambers, which means from a very early stage you're going to be exposed to excellent work, and your training is going to be of a really excellent quality, which will stand you in very good stead for a career at the bar.
Applicants should apply to FTB because, well, for three reasons really. Firstly, it's an ambitious and dynamic place to work. The quality of work that comes here, particularly for juniors, is a very high level. And that means you can build your career very quickly and get a lot of great experience early on. Secondly, the culture is fantastic. You work with people who are very supportive, who are very charming, who take your development very seriously, and that's really valuable. And finally, if you're interested in our practice areas, it is the place to be. We've been involved in the vast majority of cases and leading cases in environmental law, in planning law. If that's what you're interested in, you'll get exposure here to the people who worked on those cases, and you'll potentially get to be involved with them. and that's a great opportunity. The reason I applied to FTB, well, it's twofold really. The first was that I was really interested in our practice areas, so I was very interested in planning law, judicial review and environmental law. And this is a market leader in those areas. It means that I knew I'd get exposure to top level work in those areas. I'd get to be working closely with leaders in the field. But the second reason was cultural. I'd experienced FTB through a couple of mini pupillages, one virtual, one in person. And the people had been so lovely, so supportive, clearly the kind of people that I really wanted to work with, and I felt I'd fit in well here. Unfortunately, during my course of pupillage, I found that that was a correct assessment, and the culture here is great, and it fits me very well.
I think also you should apply to FTB if you want to be part of the kind of small, medium-sized set. We are smaller than some other chambers, and I think that very much influences the culture at chambers. In particular, I'd say that FTB is a very collaborative environment, and you get to know everybody in the chambers.
In terms of how Chamber supports you during pupillage, you'll have 3 pupillage supervisors. All of my pupillage supervisors were excellent, and they constantly gave me really good feedback and tips on how to improve. We also have an open door policy. At all times I felt free to discuss cases with other members of Chambers, and they were always really helpful. The pupillage is also very structured as well, so there are assessments that you and your co-pupil will both complete. It's very clear that there's no competition between you and your co-pupil, and they are then assessed according to fixed criteria. And again, you're given very good feedback. You're given the opportunity to comment on the feedback that you've received. And there was also a mentoring program as well. So I was assigned a senior mentor who was in Silk, and I was also assigned a junior mentor as well. And they both proved to be fantastic resources to support me throughout pupillage.
During pupillage, I feel like Chambers supports you in a few ways. First of all, there are a structured series of seminars with a number of members of Chambers in relation to the different areas of practice that we do. And that means that you get a kind of crash course very early on during pupillage on those crucial areas, so that when the issues come up during your pupillage, you have the basics, or you at least know where to go to find out about the kind of basics you need to know.
I would say it's very difficult to describe the average day in the life of a pupil because there simply is no average day. By definition, every day is different. I think the principal differences are between your first 6, where you are dealing much more closely with your pupillage supervisor and essentially assisting them with their work, and they're showing you the ropes of how everything works. And then in your second 6, where you are allowed to do advocacy in your own right, and you get to go to court, which is daunting, but it's exhilarating, and you learn to always expect the unexpected.
I think in terms of tips I would offer to prospective applicants here, try and get a sense for our practice areas, planning law, environmental law. Showing some passion, some interest, some knowledge goes a really long way in our interview process. And also it's useful for you as well, because it helps you identify this as the kind of place you want to work. Also try and undertake a mini pupillage. It's a really good way to see our work in action, get to meet members of Chambers, and help you figure out whether this is the right sort of place for you.
The main thing that I would tell future applicants to FTB is that we do not expect an encyclopedic knowledge of planning law. I can assure you that you will be learning a lot about planning law during your pupillage. What we do expect is for applicants to have a sound understanding of public law and to be generally interested in how it relates to the use of land. And it really is a very interesting area to practice in. It changes a lot. It's highly political, and it's a really interesting and rewarding career to be able to work with local communities, developers and local planning authorities to basically build the future that we need. In terms of the transition from pupillage to tenancy, it's It's a difficult period which everyone has to face, but at FTB you're very well prepared for that because you've already had a practicing second six, and so the transition is quite smooth. It's always interesting when you start to get your cases in your own right, but I always felt able to discuss points where needed with other members of chambers. But it really is an interesting part in your life, but where essentially, you know, they have to remove the stabilisers and off you go as a barrister in your own right.
Since becoming a tenant, I found it interesting the way that my practice has developed compared to others of my level. So for example, I would say my practice is about a third planning inquiries, a third court work and a third infrastructure work. Whereas my colleagues of a similar level have developed in different directions, one of them specialising primarily in compulsory purchase and the other in environmental law and judicial review challenges. And I think that's an indication of the way in which we can develop our practices in areas that particularly suit and interest us.
Other than planning and environmental law, the areas of practice that I tend to specialise in are major infrastructure planning, so that's like normal planning but for major infrastructure projects like roads, airports, that kind of thing, new power stations, and you can imagine that with the drive to net zero that's a huge part of our work stream now, and FTB is really at the bleeding edge of that. And also compulsory purchase and compensation, which is perhaps a topic that won't be familiar to lots of law students, but is about assembling the land that's needed to deliver these kinds of major infrastructure projects, or also perhaps smaller schemes like estate regenerations to help deliver new homes and affordable homes for the communities in which those estates are situated. I'm supported by chambers in several ways. I think on a day-to-day basis I'm primarily supported by my clerking team who manage my diary, help with liaison with clients, and who also try to make sure that I'm put forward for the right cases so that I get the right work at the right times. I'm also supported by other members of chambers, sometimes more senior members, so perhaps if I've got a knotty problem that I'd like to talk through with somebody. Other more senior members of chambers are always available to do that with. And then other times, perhaps with more junior members of chambers, say if I need some assistance with a research note, or if I need perhaps a first draft of something, I'm supported in that way. The culture at FTB in 3 words: kind, supportive, respectful.
I would describe the culture at FTB as supportive, forward-thinking and collegiate.
I would describe FTB in 3 words as collegiate, supportive, and if you'll let me have a word with a hyphen in it, intellectually rigorous.